One of the biggest challenges we had when building our campervan was making sure that we had enough space to fit all of our electrical components whilst allowing us to fit 2 fixed double bunks. So if you've seen a few of our videos, you will already know that our medium wheelbase crafter is built around having completely fixed beds for both the children down below and us up on the top beds. The reason we went for that is because we didn't want to have to faff around with a pop top or changing seats in the dining area. This layout works perfectly for us. However, the challenge was making sure that we had enough width on the lower beds, but still enough space to have a cabinet for all of our electrical components. There is another solution, and that is to basically put all of our electrical components underneath the beds. However, that then eats into your garage space and storage for toys and paddle boards and boxes and all those other things, which we didn't want to do. So in this video, I'm going to show you a full breakdown of our electrical components and how I organised it to try and maximise as much space as possible inside our medium wheelbase crafter campervan. Hopefully this video will be useful for you if you're also looking at a similar layout, have a young family, and are looking to maximise the amount of space you can make in your van and minimise the cost of the build process. If you're new to this channel, please like, please subscribe. We value everyone that comes along to this channel and watches our content. We really appreciate it. We've got loads more videos coming very soon, more about our van build, some of the mistakes we've made, and helpful advice around how you can approach your own van build. Right, let's hop to the back and see what it's all about. So one of the first things to point out, these beds for the kids, they are divided. They are 2 separate mattresses. They're around about 160 centimeters long and 60 centimeters wide, which gives the kids a perfect little den area for them to relax, chill out, and they find it really cozy. The other real benefit is in the summer, this area actually stays pretty cool, and in the winter, it stays relatively warm. Our diesel heater is in the middle of the van, so it can pump nice warm air straight up and through to the back of the van and up to the top. So all year round camping is really ideal for both the kids and us in the upper beds. But as you can see, the challenge is the width. And as our kids grow, there will be a limitation, but we reckon we've still got 2 or 3 years yet. So realistically, in most campervan builds, you don't really need to be going to the electrical box all the time. So it's not something that we wanted to have absolute access to really easily from the garage area, but I also need to make sure that I have got access should I need to do any maintenance, any repairs or replacing components, that sort of thing. So that's why our electrical cabinet is still on the right hand side and I've managed to squeeze everything in. To access it though, I've just got to move these mattresses out of the way. So here we go, it's not too much effort just to move the bedding out of the way. Now we can access the electrical cabinet. Okay, so here we are, and as you can see, it's quite cozy, but it is also functional. So the first component that I'm going to talk about is obviously the battery. Now I've mentioned it before in a couple of our other videos, but this is the Fogstar Drift Pro 460 amp hour lithium battery. It has a max continuous output of around about 300 amps. It's quite a big unit, and as you can see, it also weighs quite a bit. I think it's either 24 or 30 kilos. So this, in order to get the beds as low as possible to give the kids enough height, I had to make sure that effectively this panel here is just above the wheel arch, but it's all structurally supported underneath with various battens. So this is essentially on top of the wheel arch. Where the cabinet comes out, there's a beam that runs along here, and the bedboards sit on that, and then the kids' mattresses. So that's the main plan, is in order to maximise the width, is to get the beds as low as possible, sink on top of the wheel arch, and at that end, it's so low, I've actually cut out like a semicircle so it moulds around the very top of the wheel arch. So technically, this mattress here, which is just behind you, is actually sat just on that wheel arch, but it's all protected and it's fine, and obviously there's pillows, so it's not uncomfortable for the kids. So then moving around back to the battery, there is the positive cable runs out straight into, I think it's a 60 amp Victron mega fuse, and then that power cable runs down through here, through the trunking, and then into the circuit breaker, which is a blue C circuit breaker. So that means that at any point I can flick this and it will disconnect everything being powered from the battery. From here, the power then goes straight into this Victron Links power in. Now this acts as a distributor or a bus bar in common tongue. You can buy the Victron distributor, but I actually saved about £50 by getting the power in and then modifying it to accept mega fuses. Now there is a link up here that takes you to a very cool video which explains how to do that. I'm not going to go into all that detail, but essentially you can save yourself a little bit of money, and the only difference is that you don't get the little LED lights that show you if a fuse is out, although you can also modify that as well if you really want to. The other thing it doesn't do, if you had a bigger system, is that you could then connect this into your, I believe you can connect this into then your servo, which would then again give you signals to detect if something had blown through your display or your app or whatever. So again, we don't have that, but I'm not worried about it, because if something's blown, you're going to know about it pretty quickly because major components aren't going to work. But from here, this acts as your positive and negative bus bar to then distribute power to all of your major circuits. So going up, we've got power going from our battery charger, which is from the alternator. So this is the Orion 12 volt 30 amp. So that will take power from the alternator when we're driving. There is also a D+ signal here, which I've wired in, which just informs, because it's a smart alternator, it informs the battery charger that there is ignition on and to draw the power. Loads of info on the net about that, but it was a bit of a faff, if I'm honest, to try and set that up correctly and then adjust the input and lockout settings accordingly to make sure that the battery charger was always powering, knowing that the ignition was on. So essentially we've got power in from the alternator and then power out through the negative and positive, and that's 16mm squared cables going straight into our distributor. Then on the solar side, we've got power coming in and we've got power coming out, again back to the distributor. So all of this power, these two come into our distributor and then back out to our battery to keep it always topped up. Just behind here, you can't quite see this, but just behind this isolator is our battery monitoring shunt, which is the Victron BMV 712, and it has a little digital display which is up above the kitchen unit. So this is also bolted directly to the distributor to minimize the amount of cable length and make it a really neat, tidy install. But there is also an Ethernet cable that runs from that back through here, over the wheel arch, under the beds, and then up to that little dash, which I'll show you in a minute, that little gauge. Essentially it's like your fuel gauge, and it just monitors the battery, it monitors the power going in, the power going out, how many cycles it's been through, your state of charge, how quickly at the current draw, how quickly your batteries are depleted. It just gives you a whole load of really useful information, which you can also see on the app to be able to monitor the health and the state of your battery. I forgot to mention these cables, so the positive and the negative from the battery to the distributor, these are, if I remember correctly, 95mm square cables, which are pretty thick cables and a bit of a pig to work with, but they are also ever so slightly oversized to make sure that this system is completely safe. The reason for that is because this, just behind me, is the inverter, which is what we use to do all of our cooking with. So the good thing about the Victron stuff is that if anything fails, I know that I can just take a component out and replace it. Now I've mentioned it before on a previous video that the battery charger, this, when I bought it, there was talk of the new one coming out, which is now the Orion XS, which is a 50 amp charger. It's a lot smaller, it doesn't get anywhere near as hot, and it's way more efficient. So at some point I will be replacing that, and it should be a straight swap, because although it's designed to have thicker cables, the run from here to where I've connected to the battery is less than 5 meters, so I should be able to get away with 16mm squared. However, I will be double checking that before I install it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to pull that out and reroute an entire new thicker cable for the power in. But anyway, that is a future me problem. So essentially this side is the DC side of the van, where everything is 12 volts. And then on this side, let's move the camera around, this side is the AC side of the van, or the electrical system, where we are taking the DC voltage and we are converting it into AC volts. So 12 volts into 240 volts, and that's what this does. This is the Victron Multi Plus 2 2000 VA. You can get bigger inverters, however, we didn't want to go too big, mainly because of size, budget, but also the induction hob that we use is only 600 watts max on when both hobs are in use, so it's quite a low wattage induction hob. Most of the inbuilt ones are sort of 2000 watts plus, and if you're going to do that route, then you do need to increase your size of your inverter. We don't use things like air fryers or hair dryers, particularly not at the same time as cooking, so we felt it wasn't necessary to have a bigger inverter than what we've got, and to be honest, we've had no issues whatsoever. But again, the cables running in and out from this are all 95mm squared, including an additional earth cable which runs from here to the chassis of the van, and that's like a backup earthing point. Should anything fail here, this one will back up. If there's 240 volts running, you do not want that sparking through the van. There's not really much more that I can say about this, other than there is a switch on the bottom that you can then switch between inverter and charger. The reason it's called the multiplus is that it does two functions. One is charges the battery if you're on an electric hookup, and inverts 12 volts from the battery into 240 volts. So on the other side of this, on the outside of the van, we have an electric hookup point. So if for whatever reason we need to plug in, and we've done it a couple of times where there's been no solar, we know we're not going to be driving for a few days, we just had to plug in just for a little top up, we can plug in there, flick into charger mode, and then that will power all of our circuits and charge up the leisure battery appropriately. So moving around a little bit further, up here we've got the main circuit breaker for the inbound 240 volts. So when we're on shore power, if for whatever reason there's a surge in power, this circuit breaker will kick in. I believe this is at 30 milliamps. And then we've also got our solar breaker down here again, so if there is a surge in power from our solar panels, then that will also kick in and disconnect the input power going to there to help protect the system. So this is a circuit breaker for all the inbound power going into the charger when we're on an electric hookup, but you also want to make sure that you've got some sort of circuit protection on the outbound going from the charger to all of your sockets in the van. So we've got one AC socket at the front and one AC socket down below, and just down here is our main consumer unit. So the AC power comes out of our inverter into the main consumer unit and then gets distributed from there to our two 3-pin outlets connected with circuit breakers. So should there be any surges or too much power, then they will kick in and protect the circuit. Whilst I'm on circuit protection, flicking back to the 12 volt side of things, we also have just here we have the battery protect, which is I believe 65 amps, and what this does, it takes the power in on this lug from the battery, and then it monitors how much power is going across. And then from here, we've got one line going up here to our Sea Blue 12-way distributor. And then from here, we've got things like our plinth lights, our max fan, LED strips, our heater, our fridge, reading lights, and other 12-volt bits and pieces. So I've got, I think, 2 sockets spare? Yeah, on this one, and I've labelled them all up. So you've got negative and positives all going into there. You'll then notice there's a second cable splintering off from that. That is going off to another 12-way fuse box, but that is on the other side of the van, and essentially it acts as a satellite fuse box, which means that I can then add other components on the other side of the van without having to bring everything back to this point here, which would be a right faff, having to run cables in and out behind all these electrical components. And as you can see there's more trunking where loads of cables run up and down. So as I mentioned, basically below and here is access to our consumer. I just need to remove this box. And there we go, that's our consumer unit. So again, I can just very quickly check if any of these breakers are disconnected, if there's a problem, and resolve it from there. But that's our power going in, power going out to all of our circuits, and another earthing point. I'm not sure if you can just make that out. Just underneath there is the chassis point for the distributor, chassis point for the inverter, and the chassis earth point for our circuit breaker. So they're all grounded in the same area, directly to the van. Scrubbed back the metal, cleaned it all up, bolted it in using rivet nuts, so they are not coming loose. But that just keeps everything secure and makes sure that we're always grounded appropriately. That's our rear 3-pin outlet, and then we've also got another 12 volt for if we want to use like an air compressor or something like that. And so just to complete the video, this is what I mentioned. This is the BMW 712. This is the fuel gauge effectively for all of our electrical components, and you can see all sorts of things. You know, it's using 20 watts at the moment, mainly because I've got the main lights on, and it just gives you a lot of really useful information. And then this is the multi-control GX. So we didn't want a fancy panel necessarily. We just wanted something really simple. So the wife can literally flick that switch. Now the inverter is on. You can then plug whatever appliances into your 3-pin and know that it's going to work. You can adjust the amps. That's actually for charger, the amps. So if you're on shore power and you know that it's a 6 amp hour shore power from the campsite, you can adjust that down, adjust it up to 10. And then if we want to charge from shore power, you just flick it to the other side into charger mode, and it does. That's it. You don't have to do anything more than that. Literally just flick that switch. Everything else I can then control from my app. Just literally connect to all of the devices and see whatever state they are in. See how much solar is being generated. See what the state of the battery, state of the DC charger. So that is our electrical system. It's simple, it's effective. It means that we can stay off grid for approximately a week and not have to worry too much about having to drive somewhere to top up the batteries. We know that we've got our solar. On that, we've got 350 watts of solar, 2 panels, 175 watts each to help keep our batteries topped up. So that is our system. It's simple, it's effective, it's kind of no fuss, relatively budget, given it's still a Victron build, which can be expensive, but it works for us. It means that we can stay off grid for up to a week usually. It means that we can still power all of our devices, cook on induction, not have to worry about gas and safety too much. And we love it. If you've got any questions about building your Victron system, please drop them in the comments below. I will caveat that I'm not an electrical professional, so please make sure you seek your own advice and speak to experts. But if you've got any questions, drop them below and I'll do my best to answer. Thank you very much. Please like, please subscribe. Please watch out for our next video coming very soon. Boom.